Right, so hello and welcome back to Books and Things, and welcome to another video, and today I'm going to be talking about some books that I might read in March. So I think I'm going to try to get into the habit of making a monthly TBR slash pile of possibilities. Let's be honest, every TBR I ever make for anything is always a pile of possibilities, and that's the way I like it. One thing I've been sort of trying to do on Booktube for a year or so and not doing very well at is to try to take part in more readathons that aren't the ones I host. I always do Jane Austen July and Booktuber every year, and I always dedicate like the whole month of July and October to those readathons, which is really great. But there are a lot of wonderful readathons hosted by other people which are really exciting and which I sometimes forget to take part in. Or which I take part in, but I then forget to say I've taken part in because I read like one book for the readathon, so it didn't feel worth making a TBR, and then I forgot to talk about it in my wrap-up. That happens a lot. So I thought maybe if I do a monthly TBR slash pile of possibilities every month, then I can talk about some of the books I picked out for various readathons going on in a month, and I can also keep myself a bit accountable in terms of reading books from my physical TBR or aiming to read books from my physical TBR. So I thought I would try to get into the habit of doing monthly TBRs. I'm filming this before March has started, but to be honest, this is going to be up like halfway through March at this rate because I have plenty of other videos to put up, but that's fine. So there are 3 readathons going on in March, which I would like to take part in a little bit, and then I also have a couple of proof copies that I've got recently that I'm excited to read this month, and I also have lots of Walter Scott Prize reading I want to do. So I have a bunch of books which I may or may not read in March. Let's go through them. So the first readathon which I want to take part in March is the Irish Readathon. This is hosted by Leanne Rose, Lisa in Bookland, and Aoife from Words of Clover. I'll link all their channels down below and their announcement videos. The thought behind the Irish Readathon is just to encourage you to read more Irish literature in the month of March. There are some challenges, but I'm not going to be doing the challenges. I'm just going to pick a few Irish books that I want to read this month. I thought it would be nice to try and read an Irish classic, and one book from my like long-term Victorian literature TBR that I'm trying to work my way through this year and next is The Unsocial Socialist by George Bernard Shaw. George Bernard Shaw was an Irish writer who is most well known for being a playwright, but An Unsocial Socialist is in fact a novel. I also don't think it's very long, so I'm hoping I will manage to fit it in March. I was hoping to read it last October and didn't manage to. I don't know very much about this, and it's quite hard to, you know, get information about classics online without spoilers, but I love the title, An Unsocial Socialist, and I assume it's going to be about socialism, and that's all I need to know. This is from 1883, and I think it'll be a really interesting read. One Irish book that I am definitely keen to read in March is this. This is My Father's House by Joseph O'Connor. This book has just been longlisted for the Walter Scott Prize, and I am reading along with the Walter Scott Prize, and this is the only Irish book on the Walter Scott Prize longlist this year, so I thought I would prioritise this and read it during the Irish Readathon in March. This book is set in 1940s Italy, and it's about an Irish priest who is helping people flee and escape from Rome during Nazi occupation. I'm really excited to read this one. I've read one Joseph O'Connor book before, which I enjoyed, but I found a little bit more literary than is my general taste, I suppose, but a few people have said that this one is like much more thrillery than some of his other books, so I feel like I could really get on with it, and it sounds really interesting. So hoping that I'll pick this one up this month for the Walter Scott Prize longlist and also for the Irish Readathon. This year, one of my big goals is to try and get down my physical TBR, and I was looking through my shelves and I found that I had one book from an Irish author on my shelves, and that was all. But that is Emma Donoghue's Learn by Heart, which I'm very excited to read. Emma Donoghue is an Irish author. I think she's now based in Canada. This book isn't set in Ireland, it's set in England, but it's set in 1805, and it follows real-life historical figure Anne Lister as a teenage girl at boarding school, and her relationship with another girl called Eliza Rain. I'm pretty sure Eliza is also a real historical figure. I am very excited to read this book because I love Emma Donoghue a lot, and I also find Anne Lister a really interesting historical figure. I've read her diaries, which she wrote later on in her life, and they're fascinating. So I'm really excited to read this one, and I'm actually going to read this one for 2 readathons, both for the Irish Readathon and also for the Herstory Readathon. So the Herstory Readathon is hosted by Charlotte from Coney Reads and Brittany from Literarily Smitten, and the Herstory Readathon is all about reading books, fiction or non-fiction, about women from the past in celebration of Women's History Month. And obviously Learn by Heart is about Anne Lister, who was a real historical figure. I was hoping I would have more books either on my TBR or on the Walter Scott Prize long list that would count for the Herstory Readathon, but I don't think I have any other books on my physical TBR or on the Walter Scott Prize long list that are about real historical female figures. So Learn by Heart will be my little nod towards that readathon in March. Then another readathon that takes place every March is March of the Mammoths, hosted by Jason from Old Blues Chapter and Verse, which is a readathon all about reading books that are over 800 pages long. And this month I'm going to be reading Little Dorrit by Charles Dickens for the Mega Dickens read-along. If you want more information about the Mega Dickens read-along, I'll leave all that down below. And Little Dorrit is, I think, 950 pages or so in this edition, so definitely counts as a mammoth. Little Dorrit is a wonderful book, one of my favourites. I have read it many times before. It tells a story of a young woman called Amy Dorrit, whose father is in prison for debt and has been for 22 years, and she spends her nights living in debtor's prison with him and then goes out to work in the day in order to support her family. Of course, this is a 1,000-page novel. There's a lot of other things going on, but it is truly fantastic. One of my favourite Dickens books. Then another book which kind of counts for March of the Mammoths is this. This is Vany the Vampire by James Malcolm Ryder. So Vany the Vampire was a Victorian penny dreadful that was published serially. I think the whole thing is something like 1,500 pages, so definitely a mammoth. I here have volume 1, which I think is like 700 pages, so not technically over 800 pages. I started reading this in February for the We Love Jenny Readathon in honour of the life of Jennifer Brooks, who was a fantastic booktuber who passed away in January. This was her favourite Victorian novel, and I have been really enjoying it so far, but because this physical edition is so big and so heavy, I haven't got very far through it because I can't take it out of the house. It's too big. But I am really enjoying it so far. It's very fun and very silly in a way that I really enjoy. Like, there have been some ridiculous vampiric moments or some like ridiculous discussions between the characters about vampires in just like such a fun way, and I'm just having a great time with it. So I'm looking forward to continuing with this. To be honest, I think this will be a book that takes me like 4 months to read, and that's absolutely fine by me. And that's just volume 1. Maybe I'll read volume 2 the second half of this year. But yeah, I'm really enjoying this so far. Then I have 2 review copies that I've been sent in the last month, which I would really like to try and read in March. They're both relatively short, so maybe I'll manage it. But you know, this is very much a pile of possibilities, and I have way too many books on this list. So one of them is The King's Witches by Kate Foster. I read her debut novel, The Maiden, last year and really loved it, so I'm very excited for this one. This book is set in the 17th century and is about the wife of King James VI of Scotland, who was kind of obsessed with outlawing witchcraft, and I assume that the Queen is gonna get like caught up with people who are accused of witchcraft. This sounds like a really interesting book, and I'm very excited to read it. And then here we have Estella's Revenge by Barbara Havelock, which is a retelling of Great Expectations from the perspective of Estella. I don't know how much of this will be retelling and how much of this will be sequel, but I am very curious to read this. I think it could be really good fun. I love Great Expectations a lot, and I love Dickens a lot, so I'm really curious to see what this new retelling does with the character of Estella. And then, as I've already mentioned, I really want to do some Walter Scott Prize reading in March and read through lots of books on the Walter Scott Prize long list for historical fiction. I did a video all about the long list a couple of weeks ago, so I'll leave that down below. But I requested lots of the long list from my library. So I've already held up My Father's House by Joseph O'Connor, and then I also have these 4 here, and I also have one on audiobook. I'm not going to read all 6 of those Walter Scott Prize books in March. That's not going to happen, but I might read some of them. I think I'm probably just going to see what I feel like picking up next rather than actually setting out in this video which I'm going to read. So here we have Hungry Ghosts by Kevin Jarrett Hussein, which is set in 1940s Trinidad and looks at the relationship between 2 families after one person from one of the families vanishes. I also have Music in the Dark by Sally Magnuson, which is set in 18th and 19th century Scotland and North America and looks at the legacy of the Highland clearances. We also have Cuddy by Benjamin Myers, which follows the life and legacy of St Cuthbert from the Anglo-Saxon times to the modern day. I think I will read this one in March. I think this will be top of my priority list because I was told when I took it out of the library that someone else has put a hold on it, so I'm not going to be able to renew this one. This needs to be top of my list, and I'm very excited for it. Then we also have The Fraud by Zadie Smith, which is set in Victorian Britain and looks at a trial for fraud. I think probably I'm not going to end up reading this one in March because I think the chance of this being shortlisted for the Walter Scott Prize is pretty high, so I feel like I could leave this one till later on, till May or June. Then finally there is The House of Doors by Tan Tuong Eng, which is set in 1920s Malaysia. This one I have out from the library on audiobook, and I don't have many audiobooks on this TBR. I mean, Little Dorrit I'll listen to on audiobook, and that's like many hours, but I definitely will need another audiobook in March, so I will definitely listen to The House of Doors this month. Then one other work of historical fiction I'm hoping to read in March is this. This is The Little Stranger by Sarah Waters, which I'm hoping to buddy read with Marissa from Blatantly Bookish. I'll link her channel down below. Marissa and I have been buddy reading Sarah Waters books together for 7 years. We first buddy read Fingersmith together, which was both of our first Sarah Waters books back in 2017, and then since then we have been buddy reading a Sarah Waters book every year or so, and this is the last one we have to read together. This book is set just after the Second World War in a somewhat mysterious country house, and follows what happens when a doctor is summoned to this house to treat a patient there, but it seems to be potentially haunted. I'm so excited for this one. The premise is entirely the kind of thing I love, and it is by Sarah Waters, and I just think this one is going to be amazing. So that list is definitely already more than enough books to keep you occupied in March. I will not manage to read them all. However, this is now a pile of possibilities of 13 books, which doesn't feel very neat, so why don't we pick 2 more books out of my TBR jar just to round it up to 15. I'm not going to read 15 books of this length in 1 month, but you know, that is fine. Here is my TBR jar, which has in it all the names of all of the books that have been in my TBR since before December 2023. And I thought it would be good to add a couple of titles from my long-term TBR into this list, because there are so far only 2 books on it that I've owned since before December 2023. Mostly because there are a lot of library books on this list. In my February TBR, I picked out 4 titles from my TBR jar, and I read 2 of them, and then I read another book from my long-term TBR that I hadn't picked out. So, you know, mixed success, but let's pick out 2 things from my TBR jar today and see what they are. Novelist as a Vocation and Common Ground. So here we have Novelist as a Vocation by Haruki Murakami, which is a non-fiction work about writing. And we also have Common Ground by Naomi Ishiguro, which is a novel, a kind of coming-of-age story, I guess, I think about 2 young boys who make friends at school and then meet each other later in life. There is a medium chance I might end up reading one of these in March. I have a lot on this list already, but this one is pretty short and I am really excited for this. And also, I have quite a lot of like heavy book slash hardbacks on this list, which I can't like take out about with me very easily, so this one being a paperback might be a bit easier, a bit more portable for any reading I do away from home in March, so I might read these, but you know, we will see how I go. So there we go, that is my very large pile of possibilities for the month of March. Let me know if you've read any of these books, if there are any that I really need to prioritise, and otherwise that's all for now. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll be back very soon with another bookish video.